St. Petersburg, 1864. A book appears that will change literature forever. It's narrated by a nameless man, bitter, contradictory, consumed by resentment. He speaks directly to the reader, confessing his pettiness, his spite, his inability to act decisively or connect with others. I am a sick man. I am a spiteful man. I am an unattractive man. I believe my liver is diseased. These are the opening words, not "Call me Ishmael," not "It was the best of times," but a confession of sickness, physical and spiritual, delivered with perverse pride. The narrator is 40 years old, a retired low-level civil servant living alone in a basement in St. Petersburg. He has nothing and no one, and he's going to tell us exactly why. For the next 100 pages, he won't shut up. He contradicts himself constantly. He makes arguments and then demolishes them. He insults the reader, apologizes, insults us again. He's brilliant and pathetic, insightful and deluded, capable of devastating psychological analysis and completely incapable of normal human interaction. This is the underground man, and he represents something terrifying. Consciousness turned against itself, reason become paralysis, self-awareness becomes self-torture. He's what happens when you think too much, feel too deeply, see through society's comfortable lies, but can't find anything better to replace them with. The man writing this is Fyodor Dostoevsky. He's 43 years old. His first wife is dying. His beloved brother has just died. His magazine is failing. He's drowning in debt. And he's about to create one of the most psychologically disturbing characters in literature. Notes from Underground is not a novel in any conventional sense. It's a confession, a rant, a philosophical essay disguised as fiction. The underground man doesn't have adventures. He has thoughts. Endless, circular, self-consuming thoughts that lead nowhere except deeper into bitterness and isolation. The book is unbearably claustrophobic. We're trapped inside a mind that cannot stop analyzing itself, that turns every thought into another layer of self-reflexive consciousness until nothing is direct or simple. The underground man cannot sneeze without wondering what his sneeze means, whether he's sneezing to prove something, whether the sneeze is authentic or performed. Dostoevsky wrote this as a response to the optimistic rationalism of his era, to thinkers who believed that humans are rational creatures who will naturally choose what's good for them if only they understand their true interests. The underground man demolishes this idea completely. Humans are not rational. They don't want what's good for them. They want to suffer. They sabotage themselves. They choose destruction over happiness because at least destruction feels like choice. This is Dostoevsky's warning. Consciousness without faith leads to paralysis. Reason without morality leads to nihilism. Self-awareness without love leads to the underground, to a basement existence where you hate everyone including yourself, where you're too smart to be happy and too weak to change anything. The underground man is the future. He's what modern consciousness becomes when traditional values collapse, but nothing replaces them. He's the man who has seen through everything and found nothing worth believing in. He's us, if we're honest. The voice in our heads at 3 a.m, questioning every choice, seeing through every pretense, unable to simply be. Act 1. The underground, the sick man speaks. The underground man announces himself with perverse pride. He's sick, spiteful, unattractive, but he refuses treatment for his liver disease out of spite. Not because treatment wouldn't help, but precisely because it would. He wants to harm himself. It's the one thing he can control. This opening establishes everything we need to know. This is not someone seeking sympathy or understanding. This is someone who's made spite into philosophy, who's weaponized his own suffering, who finds meaning in meaningless self-destruction. You believe in a palace of crystal that can never be destroyed, he tells the reader. But I prefer something different. I prefer a henhouse made of boards. Why? Because you can stick out your tongue at a henhouse. You cannot stick out your tongue at perfection. You cannot rebel against what cannot be improved. This is his core insight. Humans need to rebel. Not rationally, not for good reasons, but just to assert that they exist as individuals rather than components in some perfect system. Rebellion is identity. Spite is freedom. Self-destruction is the last refuge of agency. He tells us he worked as a low-level clerk in a government office. He was rude to everyone who came seeking help, took pleasure in making people wait, in denying requests arbitrarily, in wielding the tiny power his position afforded. Not because he believed in the regulations he enforced, but because being cruel was the only way to feel anything. I was lying when I said I was a wicked official. I was lying from spite, he admits. He wasn't even good at being bad. He would plan cruelties but execute them half-heartedly. He would be rude to visitors but then feel ashamed. He couldn't commit fully even to spite. He hated his colleagues and they hated him. He had no friends. He went home every night to his basement apartment, to books and fantasies, to elaborate imaginary scenarios where he was heroic, powerful, loved. The fantasies were more real than his actual life. Reality was what he endured between fantasies. This has been his existence for 20 years. No growth, no change, no hope of improvement. Just endless circular thinking, resentment accumulating, consciousness eating itself like a snake swallowing its own tail. Now he's retired, living on a small inheritance from a distant relative he never liked. He has even less reason to interact with the world. He can stay in his basement, thinking, remembering, analyzing every humiliation, nursing every grudge, replaying every failure. He's free from all obligations, and freedom has made him more miserable than ever. He addresses the reader directly, mockingly. We're probably judging him, thinking we're better, believing we'd never sink so low. But he insists we're lying to ourselves. Everyone is just like him underneath. We just hide it better. We follow social conventions not because we believe in them, but because we're cowards, afraid to admit what we really are. This direct address creates disturbing intimacy. The underground man is talking to you specifically, personally, accusingly. He's exposing your pretenses, your hypocrisies, your secret resentments. He sees through you because he sees through himself, and he hates you for pretending to be better than you are. The confession is exhausting. He contradicts himself within sentences. He claims to believe something, then immediately denies believing it. He insults the reader, then apologizes, then says the apology itself was insincere. There's no solid ground anywhere, no position he maintains long enough to be argued against. The attack on reason. The underground man's primary target is the optimistic rationalism fashionable in 1860s Russia. Thinkers like Nikolai Chernyshevsky argued that humans are rational beings who act according to enlightened self-interest. If people understood what truly benefited them, they would choose correctly. Ignorance causes suffering. Education and reason provide solutions. Build the right social system and human nature will perfect itself. The underground man demolishes this with simple observation. Humans don't want what's good for them. Look at history. Look around you. People constantly act against their interests. They smoke knowing it damages health. They drink knowing it destroys lives. They start fights they'll lose. They pursue relationships that will hurt them. They sabotage their own success. Why? Not from ignorance, from desire. They want to want. They desire the act of desiring more than any specific object. Give them paradise and they'll destroy it out of boredom, just to have something to do. He uses the example of the Crystal Palace, a reference to Chernyshevsky's utopian novel, What Is to Be Done. The rationalists imagine a perfect society, transparent like crystal, organized for maximum happiness and efficiency. Everyone's needs met, all conflict eliminated. Perfect rational harmony. The underground man argues this would be hell. Humans don't want perfect happiness. They want struggle, suffering, chaos, the ability to choose badly. They need to assert their will, even if asserting it means choosing suffering over happiness. Remove that freedom and you remove what makes them human. Man is a frivolous and incongruous creature, and perhaps, like a chess player, loves the process of the game, not the end of it, he writes. We don't actually want to solve our problems. We want to struggle with them. We want obstacles to overcome. We want resistance against which to push. The rationalists believe humans calculate advantage like solving mathematical problems. 2 plus 2 equals 4. If happiness equals wealth plus health plus security, then pursue those things. Simple logic, obvious conclusions. But humans deliberately choose what hurts them to prove they're not machines. They reject the calculation to demonstrate they exist as individuals, not components in a rational system. Freedom means the ability to choose irrationally, to act against your interests, to suffer meaninglessly if you want to. He gives the example of a toothache. If humans were purely rational, they would either accept the pain stoically or seek treatment immediately. Instead, they moan, complain, perform their suffering for others, extract meaning from meaninglessness. Why does he moan? The underground man asks. Not from spite, certainly. He knows he's boring everyone with his moaning. He knows there's no point to it. And yet he moans. Why? Because suffering provides identity. Moaning proves you exist. The pain becomes performance, assertion of self against the void. This is perverse but psychologically accurate. People cling to their suffering, resist treatments that would help, sabotage their own recovery, not from ignorance but from preference. Suffering is familiar, health is uncertain, pain is identity. Remove it and what remains? The underground man extends this to society. Utopian schemes fail not because they're poorly designed, but because humans don't want what they promise. Perfect rational organization means no freedom, no spontaneity, no ability to act capriciously. Humans need irrationality like they need air. Remove it and they suffocate. Build your crystal palace. Organize society perfectly. Eliminate all suffering. The first person born in that paradise will immediately do something irrational just to prove they can. To demonstrate that they're not a piano key being pressed by scientific laws. To assert that their choices matter, even if the choices are self-destructive. The disease of consciousness. The underground man's central problem is consciousness itself. He's too aware, sees too clearly, thinks too deeply. And this consciousness paralyzes him completely. He describes a scenario. Someone insults him. A normal man, what he calls a man of action, would respond immediately, either fight back or accept the insult and move on. Simple, direct, resolved. But the underground man cannot act. He sees too many perspectives, considers too many implications, questions his own motives until action becomes impossible. Why does he want revenge? Is it righteous anger or wounded pride? If pride, is that legitimate? If he acts from pride, is he proving the insulter right about his character? But if he doesn't act, is he proving himself a coward? But being a coward might be rational self-preservation. But self-preservation might be weakness. But weakness might be, the analysis continues infinitely. Every action can be questioned. Every motive can be doubted. Every interpretation can be reinterpreted. Consciousness multiplies possibilities until choosing any becomes arbitrary. Paralysis results not from lack of options, but from too many options, all equally justifiable and unjustifiable. He contrasts himself with the man of action, the normal person who acts spontaneously without excessive reflection. When insulted, this person acts. When hurt, this person responds. No analysis, no second guessing, just immediate reaction guided by instinct and social conditioning. The underground man envies this simplicity, but also despises it. The man of action is like an animal, acting without understanding. Like a bull charging at red cloth, because that's what bulls do. He's free, but only because he's ignorant. His confidence comes from not seeing the complications the underground man cannot ignore. Such a man is simple and direct, he writes with contempt. He has no doubts about what to do. He sees an obstacle and he removes it. He wants something and he takes it. He's insulted and he strikes back. He's a wall, a stone, the kind of man people respect because he never questions himself. But this directness is stupidity disguised as strength. The man of action doesn't understand what he's doing or why. He just does it because that's what people like him are supposed to do. He's a function executing its program, not a conscious being making genuine choices. So the underground man is trapped. Too conscious to act spontaneously like the man of action. Too aware to believe in anything like the rationalists. Too intelligent to be happy. Consciousness has become a disease, a tumor growing in the mind, consuming everything healthy, leaving only self-awareness that serves no purpose except its own perpetuation. He describes lying on his couch for months, doing nothing, just thinking. Not productive thinking, not philosophical contemplation, just circular rumination on past humiliations, replaying conversations, imagining better responses, nursing resentments years old. I would lie there for days, he confesses, thinking about how a certain officer insulted me 6 years ago. I would replay the scene endlessly, changing my responses, imagining perfect comebacks. Then I would hate myself for wasting time on this. Then I would hate myself for hating myself. Then I would analyze why I hate myself for hating myself. The thinking never stops. It just goes deeper. His consciousness is a prison he cannot escape because the warden is himself. The guard is himself. The prisoner is himself. Every attempt to escape just adds another layer of reflection, another level of self-awareness that prevents direct action. This is the underground, not a physical location, but a mental state. The condition of being too conscious to live naturally, too aware to maintain illusions, too thoughtful to avoid seeing through everything including yourself. Once you're underground, there's no way out. You can only dig deeper. 2 + 2 makes 5. The rationalists claim that mathematical truth is the model for all truth. 2 + 2 = 4. This is objective, universal, eternal. If we could organize society according to similar rational principles, we could achieve perfect harmony. Everything could be calculated, optimized, perfected. The underground man hates this idea with passionate intensity. Yes, 2 + 2 = 4. But so what? The certainty of mathematics is precisely what makes it insufficient for human life. Humans need uncertainty, need the possibility of being wrong, need the freedom to reject even obvious truths. I admit that 2 + 2 makes 4 is an excellent thing, but if we are to give everything its due, 2 + 2 makes 5 is sometimes a very charming thing too. This isn't mathematical error, it's existential protest. The underground man knows 2 + 2 = 4. He's not stupid or insane, but he resents being bound by mathematical necessity, by truths he cannot change or choose. If everything reduces to calculation, if life is just solving equations, then what's the point? Where's the freedom? Where's the choice? Freedom, he insists, is more valuable than any benefit rational organization could provide. If perfect society required giving up freedom to choose irrationally, to act against your interests, to suffer meaninglessly, then perfect society is a prison. Better to live in chaos with free will than paradise without it. If you gave me a palace of crystal, organized everything perfectly, made me happy and comfortable, but told me I couldn't stick out my tongue at it, I would refuse. I would rather live in a basement where at least I can choose to be miserable. But there's a problem. The underground man doesn't actually believe in free will. He's just shown how consciousness paralyzes action, how too much awareness prevents choice. Every decision he might make is immediately subjected to such intense analysis that it dissolves into uncertainty. So what is he defending? Not actual freedom, but the illusion of freedom. The belief that his choices matter even when they demonstrably don't. The appearance of agency, even when he's completely paralyzed. This is the central paradox. He needs to believe in free will to maintain dignity, to avoid being reduced to a piano key struck by mechanical forces. But his consciousness shows him that free will is illusion. Every choice has causes. Every action has explanations. There's no uncaused cause, no decision that isn't determined by character, circumstances, psychology. So he defends free will while knowing it doesn't exist. He asserts his independence while acknowledging his impotence. He screams 2 + 2 makes 5 while knowing it equals 4. The scream is the point. Even if he can't change reality, he can protest it. Even if he's powerless, he can refuse to accept powerlessness gracefully. Even if consciousness is disease, he can be proudly sick rather than seeking health that would mean accepting what he cannot change. You offer me the palace, the perfect life, the rational organization, he tells the rationalists. But I want to be able to refuse it. I want the right to stick out my tongue, to choose wrongly, to suffer pointlessly. Because without that possibility, I'm not human. I'm just a mechanism executing its program. This is profound and absurd simultaneously. He's defending freedom by refusing happiness, asserting agency by choosing misery, proving he exists by making himself suffer. The logic is perfect and perfectly self-destructive. The memories begin. The second part of the book shifts from philosophy to narrative, showing the underground man's ideas in action through memories from 20 years earlier when he was 24. These memories demonstrate that his isolation isn't noble solitude, but result of spectacular social incompetence and self-sabotage. The tone shifts completely. Part 1 was abstract philosophy. Part 2 is excruciating social embarrassment, every interaction failing in ways that are painful to witness. We see how the underground man's consciousness operates in actual situations, and it's even worse than he described. First memory. Walking on Nevsky Prospect, the main street in St. Petersburg. An officer approaches from the opposite direction. Normal people would step aside or navigate around each other automatically. The underground man sees the encounter as existential test. If he steps aside, he's admitting inferiority, accepting subordinate position in social hierarchy. The officer clearly considers himself superior, expects inferiors to defer. Stepping aside would confirm this hierarchy, would be complicity in his own subordination. But if the officer steps aside first, that would mean the officer acknowledges the underground man's equal status, treats him as someone worth respecting. Since the officer is an aristocrat and the underground man is just a poor clerk, this seems unlikely. The underground man stands his ground, expecting collision or confrontation. The officer walks straight through him, physically moving him aside without slowing down, without acknowledging his existence. Just moves him like an object in the path, continues walking without looking back. The underground man is humiliated but also oddly satisfied. He has confirmation that the officer despises him, that the world denies his existence, that his resentment is justified. The insult validates his worldview. He's not paranoid. People really do treat him as inferior, as nothing. For 2 years, he obsesses over this encounter. 2 years of replaying the scene, imagining different outcomes, fantasizing about revenge. He walks Nevsky Prospect regularly, hoping to see the officer again, planning what he'll do when they meet. He imagines confrontations where he demonstrates his worth, where the officer is forced to acknowledge him. Elaborate scenarios where circumstances force the officer to realize his error, to see the underground man's superiority, to apologize. None of these fantasies result in action. They're just mental masturbation, substitutes for actual life, compensation for powerlessness. He knows this but continues anyway, because the fantasies provide what reality cannot: a sense of agency, of power, of mattering. Finally, after 2 years, he decides to act. He'll walk past the officer without stepping aside. He'll treat the officer with the same disregard the officer showed him. This will be his revenge, his assertion of equality. He plans this for months. He rehearses the encounter. He practices walking with proper posture and speed. He borrows money to buy a new coat so he'll look respectable when it happens. The preparation is obsessive, absurd, revealing how much this trivial gesture matters to him. When it finally happens, when he manages to not step aside and bump the officer's shoulder, the officer doesn't notice, doesn't react, doesn't acknowledge that anything unusual occurred. The underground man's grand gesture of defiance is completely invisible to the person it was meant to affect. But the underground man considers this a victory. He stood his ground. He proved his existence through resistance, even though the resistance had no effect. The victory is entirely internal, invisible to everyone except himself, which is perfect because it can never be disproven or taken away. This is his pattern, creating elaborate mental dramas around trivial events, interpreting everything as confirmation of his worldview, achieving imaginary victories that require no actual accomplishment. Reality is just raw material for the fantasy life that's more real to him than actual experiences. The dinner party disaster. Second memory. Learning that some former schoolmates are organizing a farewell dinner for Zverkov, a colleague who's leaving Petersburg for a provincial posting. The underground man wasn't invited. He invites himself anyway, despite not liking any of them and knowing they don't like him. Why force himself into a gathering where he's unwelcome? Because the rejection is unbearable. Being excluded confirms his worthlessness. He cannot accept being judged unworthy of their company. So he must insert himself, must force them to acknowledge his existence even if the acknowledgement is negative. He tells himself he's going to show them his superiority. to demonstrate that he doesn't need their approval. But really, he desperately needs their approval. Desperately wants to be included. Desperately hopes they'll realize they misjudged him. The contradictions don't bother him. He contains multitudes of incompatible desires and beliefs. He wants to belong while despising belonging. He wants their respect while considering them beneath him. He wants connection while maintaining that connection is impossible. He arrives at the restaurant early, before the others. He sits alone, drinking wine to calm his nerves, already regretting coming. When the other guests arrive, Zverkov, Trudolyubov, Ferfichkin, Simonov, they're visibly disappointed to see him. They make no effort to include him in conversation. They talk among themselves about people and events he knows nothing about. He sits silent, nursing resentment, occasionally making awkward comments that kill conversation rather than contributing to it. He's intensely conscious of being observed, of his clothes being shabbier than theirs, of his social awkwardness being visible and judged. But this consciousness doesn't help him behave better. It makes everything worse, because he's not just acting badly, he's watching himself act badly, and watching amplifies the humiliation. The dinner is torture. Everything he does is wrong. He tries to participate but says the wrong things. His attempts at wit fall flat. His efforts to match their sophistication come across as trying too hard. He can feel himself failing but cannot stop failing. Alcohol makes him belligerent. He starts arguing, making provocative statements, deliberately offending people. Not because he believes what he's saying, but because being offensive is better than being ignored. Negative attention is still attention. Being hated is better than being nothing. They increasingly exclude him from conversation, turning their backs, creating physical distance. He sits there, drunk, humiliated, furious, unable to leave because leaving would mean admitting defeat. The evening becomes endurance test, seeing how much humiliation he can absorb before breaking. At one point, he jumps up and declares he's leaving, that he's insulted, that he demands satisfaction. They ignore him. He sits back down. The humiliation of being ignored is worse than the humiliation of staying. This is masochism disguised as pride. He's inflicting suffering on himself while insisting he's asserting his dignity. He's choosing humiliation while claiming he's resisting humiliation. The contradictions multiply, layers of self-deception piling up until his actual motives become impossible to identify. The encounter with Liza. After the disastrous dinner, drunk and humiliated, the underground man visits a brothel. This wasn't planned. He follows the others when they leave the restaurant, hoping to continue the confrontation, to force some resolution. They ignore him. He ends up at the brothel where they've gone. He ends up with a young prostitute named Liza. She's 20, relatively new to the profession, still retaining some softness despite her occupation. The transaction is standard at first, mechanical and impersonal. But afterward, instead of leaving, the underground man talks to her. He's still drunk, still stinging from the dinner humiliation, still needing to humiliate someone else to restore psychological balance. He tells her about the horror of her profession, paints vivid pictures of how she'll age, how she'll be discarded when she's no longer young and attractive, how she'll die diseased and despised. He describes her future burial in detail: frozen ground, cheap coffin, no mourners, forgotten within weeks. "Do you know where you'll be in 5 years?" he asks with cruel precision. "In some basement, disease-ridden, alcoholic, beaten by your pimp, degraded beyond recognition. And in 10 years, dead, buried in a pauper's grave. No one will remember your name?" Why is he doing this? Not from compassion, from spite. He's been humiliated and needs to humiliate someone else. Liza is convenient victim, powerless to resist his verbal assault, forced by profession to endure his presence. But something unexpected happens. His descriptions of normal family life, of love and children and belonging, affect him as deeply as they affect her. He starts to believe his own rhetoric, to imagine that he could offer her salvation, that he could be the hero who rescues her from degradation. He gives her his address, tells her to visit him if she wants to escape her life. He's creating fantasy where he saves her, where he matters, where he's not the humiliated clerk but the noble savior. Then he immediately regrets it. The fantasy was perfect while it remained fantasy. Reality will be disappointing. She'll come. She'll see how he actually lives. She'll recognize that he's not a hero but another pathetic man using prostitutes while condemning prostitution. For days he alternates between hoping she'll come and dreading that she will. The anticipation is exquisite torture, consciousness multiplying possibilities, examining every scenario, preparing for disasters that might never occur. He imagines her arrival in detail. She'll knock on his door. He'll open it, perfectly composed. The wise mentor ready to guide her to better life. She'll be grateful, moved by his kindness, transformed by his intervention. Or, she'll knock. He'll be disheveled. She'll see through his pretense immediately. She'll laugh at him. Or, she won't come at all, proving that even prostitutes reject him. Every possibility is elaborated in excruciating detail. The final humiliation. When Liza finally arrives, after several days, the underground man is in the middle of a humiliating argument with his servant Apollon about wages. Apollon is sullen, disrespectful, treating the underground man with barely concealed contempt. The underground man is shouting, begging, trying to assert authority he doesn't have. Liza witnesses him being petty, weak, pathetic. His humiliation is complete. She sees him exactly as he is. Not the noble savior of his fantasy, but a broken man living in a dingy basement, unable to command respect from his own servant. He reacts with rage. He attacks her verbally, tells her he was just performing at the brothel, playing a role, that he doesn't care about her suffering and she was stupid to believe he did. He deliberately crushes the hope he created. "You thought I cared about you?" he says with vicious contempt. "I was just amusing myself. You're nothing to me, you're just a prostitute. I was testing whether you were stupid enough to fall for my act. Congratulations, you passed the test." He watches her face crumble, watches the hope drain away, watches her realize she's been manipulated. And he hates himself for doing this but cannot stop. The cruelty flows out of him like pus from a wound. Then he gives her money, turning her visit into another transaction, denying any possibility of genuine connection. He reduces what could have been meaningful to what's familiar and safe. Commercial exchange, no emotions, no vulnerability, no risk of real contact. She looks at the money like it's poison. She came seeking connection, seeking the salvation he promised, seeking to believe that escape from her life was possible. He's telling her it was all performance, all lies, all manipulation. She leaves the money on the table and runs from his apartment. The gesture devastates him. She rejected his reduction of their encounter to transaction. She asserted her dignity through refusal. She proved herself better than him, more capable of genuine feeling, more human despite her profession. He tries to chase her but can't find her. He returns to his apartment and discovers the money she left. The rejection is complete. She saw through him, saw what he is, and chose to leave even the money rather than be contaminated by continued connection. This should be a moment of transformation. He should learn from this, recognize his cruelty, change his behavior. Instead, he rationalizes everything. She didn't understand what he was doing, he tells himself. He was actually helping her by crushing her illusions. Hope is cruel when hope is false. He did her a favor by being honest about reality. Pain is the only teacher that works. She'll thank him eventually. The rationalizations are transparent, obviously false even to him. But he maintains them anyway because the alternative, admitting he destroyed the only genuine human connection he'd had in years, is unbearable. The return underground. He never sees Liza again. He doesn't try to find her. He returns to his basement, to his books and fantasies, to the isolation that's both prison and refuge. The book ends without resolution. The underground man hasn't learned anything. He hasn't changed. He's still in his basement, still thinking, still suffering, still unable to either accept life as it is or change himself to live differently. He addresses the reader one final time, acknowledging that we're bored with him, that we wanted a hero, or at least someone who learns from mistakes. But he insists that's not how life works. You're waiting for me to say I've changed, that I learned something, that I became better, he says mockingly. But that's not what happens. Most people don't transform. They just continue being what they are, trapped by character, by consciousness, by the weight of accumulated choices. He claims that at least he's honest. We're all living in undergrounds of various kinds, but we pretend otherwise. We maintain illusions of progress, growth, meaning. He's dropped the pretense. He admits he's living badly and won't change because change would require believing in something, and belief is impossible once you've seen through everything. I've only carried to the extreme what you don't dare carry even halfway, he tells us. You think you're different from me, better than me, but the only difference is cowardice. You're just more afraid to look honestly at what you are. The underground man claims superiority through his honesty about his wretchedness. Everyone else is lying about being functional, successful, happy. He at least admits the truth. Life is suffering. Consciousness is disease. Connection is impossible. Meaning is illusion. But is this honesty or just another layer of self-deception? Is he bravely facing reality or hiding from it by calling it unfaceable? The book doesn't answer. It just ends, leaving him underground, leaving us with questions that resist resolution. Act 2. The analysis. The psychology of spite. What makes the underground man so disturbing is that he's not insane. He's not psychotic or delusional. He sees reality clearly, perhaps too clearly. His analysis is often accurate. His insights are genuine. He's just completely dysfunctional. He represents the danger of consciousness without purpose, intelligence without direction, analysis without synthesis. He can tear apart any belief system, expose any hypocrisy, reveal any pretense. But he can't build anything, can't commit to anything, can't believe in anything long enough to act on it. This is Dostoevsky's warning about rationalism taken to its logical extreme. If you question everything, if you subject every belief to skeptical analysis, if you never accept anything on faith or instinct or social convention, you end up paralyzed. Consciousness becomes its own prison. The underground man also demonstrates spite as fundamental human motivation. He acts against his own interests not from ignorance, but from desire to assert his will, to prove he's not a machine calculating advantages. Spite is freedom's last refuge when all other forms of freedom are denied. He hurts himself to prove he can. He sabotages potential happiness to demonstrate that he's not bound by pursuit of happiness. He chooses suffering over pleasure to show that his choices matter more than their consequences. Spite is his only form of agency. This is psychologically accurate in disturbing ways. People do sabotage themselves. They do choose suffering. They do nurse grievances and reject help. Not always from rational calculation, but from something deeper, more perverse, more fundamentally human than rationalism acknowledges. Look at addiction. The addict knows substances are destroying their life but uses anyway. Not from ignorance, from complex motives including spite, self-destruction, assertion of autonomy. I know this is bad for me, but it's my choice becomes central to identity. Look at self-sabotage. The person on the verge of success who suddenly destroys what they've built. Not from bad luck, but from unconscious need to fail, to prove that success was impossible, to validate the belief that they don't deserve good things. The rationalists wanted to perfect human nature through proper social organization, through education, through eliminating ignorance. The underground man shows that human nature resists perfection, needs imperfection, requires the freedom to fail and suffer and choose badly. Remove that freedom, and you remove something essential to being human. Build your perfect society with perfect rational organization, and humans will destroy it just to prove they can, to demonstrate that they're not components in a machine, but conscious beings with their own will. Dostoevsky's method. Why write this as confession rather than conventional narrative? Because the form is the content. The underground man's consciousness is the subject. His endless self-analysis, his contradictions, his inability to escape his own mind, these cannot be shown from outside. We must be trapped in his head with him. The direct address to the reader creates uncomfortable complicity. The underground man isn't just confessing to us, he's implicating us, insisting we share his condition, even if we deny it. We can't maintain safe distance. He's speaking to you directly, personally, accusingly. You think you're reading about someone else, someone damaged, someone you're not like, he seems to say. But I'm the voice in your head at 3 in the morning. I'm the thoughts you have when you can't sleep. I'm what you become when all the social masks fall away. This breaks the fourth wall before modernist fiction made that technique common. The underground man knows he's in a book, knows he's being read, uses that awareness to create relationship with reader that's antagonistic and intimate simultaneously. He accuses us of judging him while doing the same things he does. You're sitting there feeling superior because you have job, relationships, normal life, but you're just better at hiding. You're just more successfully performing functionality. Underneath, you're as broken as I am. The contradictions are also deliberate. The underground man contradicts himself because consciousness itself is contradictory. We contain multitudes. We believe incompatible things. We want opposing outcomes. Presenting him as coherent would falsify the reality of consciousness. Dostoevsky is also attacking the conventions of fiction. Novels typically have heroes who grow, plots that resolve, meanings that emerge. The underground man refuses all of this. He's an anti-hero who doesn't grow, in a non-plot that doesn't resolve, embodying anti-meaning that can't be synthesized into moral lessons. This is radical for 1864. Dostoevsky is essentially creating modernist fiction decades before modernism exists, showing that psychological realism requires breaking conventional narrative structures. The fragmented form mirrors the fragmented consciousness it depicts. The book also has structural genius in how it's divided. Part 1 is abstract philosophy, the underground man explaining his ideas about reason, free will, consciousness. Part 2 is concrete memory, showing those ideas in action through specific events. Many readers prefer one part to the other. Philosophers love Part 1 for its ideas. Literary critics prefer Part 2 for its psychological precision, but they're inseparable. Part 1 without Part 2 would be just abstract theory. Part 2 without Part 1 would be unexplained behavior. Together they show consciousness and consequence, theory and practice, what we think and what we do. The prophetic vision. Dostoevsky wrote Notes from Underground in 1864 before Nietzsche, before Freud, before existentialism, before modernism. Yet the book anticipates all of these movements, captures the consciousness that would define the next century and beyond. The underground man is proto-Nietzschean in several ways. He sees through morality to the will to power underneath, recognizes that values are created rather than discovered, understands that there's no objective truth. But unlike Nietzsche's Übermensch, who creates new values, the underground man lacks the strength. He can only destroy, never build. He's proto-Freudian in revealing the power of unconscious motivations, the role of resentment and repression, the defense mechanisms we use to avoid self-knowledge. His spite is clearly compensation for impotence. His cruelty masks vulnerability. His isolation protects him from rejection. But where Freud believed analysis could liberate, the underground man shows how awareness can paralyze instead. Knowing why you're dysfunctional doesn't automatically enable change. Sometimes consciousness of the problem becomes part of the problem. He's proto-existentialist in confronting the absurdity of existence, the burden of freedom, the impossibility of authentic action in world without inherent meaning. He recognizes that we're condemned to be free, in Sartre's later phrase. But where existentialists like Sartre believed we could create meaning through commitment, the underground man can't commit to anything. Most importantly, he represents modern consciousness in its purest, most extreme form. The divided self, at war with itself, unable to act spontaneously because every action is observed and judged by internal audience. The self-awareness that makes genuine emotion impossible because you're always watching yourself feel, analyzing your own reactions, questioning your own authenticity. This is increasingly our condition. Social media has turned everyone into underground men, constantly curating self-presentation, analyzing how we're perceived, unable to simply be because we're always performing being. The smartphone is an underground, a basement from which you observe life rather than living it. Every post, every photo, every interaction is performed for an imagined audience. We watch ourselves living, document ourselves experiencing, analyze ourselves feeling. The gap between life and the observation of life, between action and the awareness of action, has become the defining feature of modern existence. The underground man is also prophetic about political extremism and resentment. He shows how powerlessness breeds spite, how those who cannot change their circumstances create philosophies that glorify their condition. The weak claim moral superiority precisely because they're weak. Inability to act becomes virtue. Nietzsche would develop this into the concept of ressentiment, the slave morality that calls powerlessness good and power evil. But Dostoevsky showed it first, demonstrated it in action through a character who embodies resentment so completely it becomes his entire identity. Can underground be escaped? The question the book raises without answering. Is there escape from the underground? Once consciousness reaches this level of self-reflexivity, this degree of skepticism, this depth of analysis, can it return to simpler mode of being? Dostoevsky's answer in later works is faith. Specifically, Russian Orthodox Christianity, with its emphasis on suffering, humility, and grace. The underground man lacks faith, and that lack is his hell. He needs something beyond reason to believe in, something that can't be analyzed away, something that provides meaning reason cannot supply. But Notes from Underground itself doesn't offer this solution. The underground man ends where he begins, trapped in consciousness, unable to believe, unwilling to pretend belief for comfort's sake. If faith is the answer, the book doesn't show how to achieve it. It only shows the cost of its absence. Characters in Dostoevsky's later novels, Raskolnikov in Crime and Punishment, Alyosha and the Brothers Karamazov, find redemption through faith, through love, through connection to something larger than themselves. But the underground man finds nothing. Maybe there is no escape. Maybe once you've descended into the underground, once you've seen through society's illusions and found nothing solid underneath, you're permanently changed. You can pretend to return to normal life, but you know you're pretending. The knowledge cannot be unknown. This is the tragedy of consciousness. It progresses in one direction only. You can't unlearn what you've learned, unsee what you've seen, unknow what you know. The underground man's condition is irreversible. He's gone too far to turn back, unless you can find something beyond reason to believe in. Something that survives analysis, that deepens rather than dissolves under examination, that provides foundation consciousness cannot erode. For Dostoevsky, that something is God. For others it might be love, beauty, justice, some transcendent value that gives meaning beyond mere survival. But achieving this requires leap of faith, willingness to commit without certainty, courage to believe despite knowing that belief might be illusion. The underground man lacks this courage. He'd rather suffer uncertainty of meaninglessness than risk comfort built on possible delusion. And perhaps he's right. Perhaps maintaining intellectual honesty, refusing comfortable lies, facing reality without illusions. Perhaps this is more important than happiness. Perhaps the underground is the price of truth. Or perhaps he's just rationalizing cowardice, calling his inability to connect honesty, calling his refusal to try wisdom, calling his isolation integrity. The book doesn't tell us which interpretation is correct. Both seem true simultaneously. The underground spreads. Notes from Underground influenced every major Russian writer who followed. Tolstoy read it and responded with his own version of redemption through faith. Chekhov read it and captured the same paralyzed consciousness in his plays where characters talk endlessly without acting. The entire Russian literary tradition grapples with the underground man's questions. But the influence extended far beyond Russia. Kafka's protagonists are underground men trapped in bureaucratic nightmares, unable to understand the systems controlling them, paralyzed by consciousness that sees too much. Camus' Morceau is underground man stripped of even the underground man's passionate resentment, reduced to pure detachment. Sartre's Roquentin experiences the nausea of consciousness seeing through the comfortable fictions that make life bearable. The voice became the voice of modernity, ironic, self-aware, unable to commit, suspicious of all certainties, sophisticated to the point of paralysis. The 20th century is the century of the underground man. Consciousness turned against itself on civilizational scale. Every intellectual who sees through social conventions but can't find authentic alternative is underground man. Every person who analyzes their emotions until the emotions disappear is underground man. Every cynic who mocks belief, while secretly envying believers, is underground man. We live in a world the underground man predicted. Technology has made us more conscious, more aware, more analytical. We have more information, more perspectives, more tools for self-examination than any previous generation. Has this made us happier? Freer? More capable of authentic action? Or has it driven us deeper underground, into basements of consciousness where we observe life through screens, analyze experiences until they lose meaning, curate identities while losing sense of who we actually are? The underground man speaks to us across 160 years, his voice still disturbing, still relevant, still warning about what consciousness becomes when detached from meaning, purpose, connection. He sits in his basement thinking, suffering, unable to change, unwilling to accept himself as he is. And if we're honest, we recognize something of ourselves in him. The voice at 3 a.m, questioning everything, finding no answers, trapped in consciousness that serves no purpose except its own perpetuation. Social media amplifies this. We're all underground men now, performing our lives for invisible audiences, analyzing how we're perceived, unable to experience anything without immediately converting it into content, into performance, into something observed rather than lived. The book remains uncomfortable to read because it offers no escape, no solution, no redemption. The underground man doesn't learn or grow. He just continues being what he is, trapped by character, by consciousness, by the accumulated weight of being himself. This is Dostoevsky's warning. Consciousness without faith leads to hell. Not afterlife hell, but present hell. The basement existence where you're too aware to be happy, too intelligent to believe, too honest to maintain comfortable illusions. The rationalists promised that reason would liberate humanity, that understanding ourselves would free us. Dostoevsky showed that reason alone could create new form of slavery, consciousness becoming its own prison, awareness becoming disease rather than cure. Dostoevsky offers no easy comfort. The underground is real. Consciousness is often disease. Awareness frequently paralyzes rather than liberates. These are not problems to be solved, but conditions to be endured or transcended through something beyond reason. The book ends. The underground man remains underground, still thinking, still suffering, still speaking to anyone who will listen, still warning us about the cost of consciousness without faith, intelligence without purpose, awareness without love. Still showing us what we become when we descend too far into ourselves and find nothing solid at the bottom. The underground awaits. It's always been there, beneath the surface of normal life, ready to swallow anyone who thinks too much, sees too clearly, questions too deeply. The underground man is not exception, but prophecy. Not aberration, but preview. Not madman, but mirror. Look into that mirror if you dare. You might see yourself looking back. From the basement, from the underground, from the consciousness that has become its own prison. The warning stands. The choice is yours. Descend and understand, or stay on the surface and pretend. Either way, the underground is spreading. The consciousness is metastasizing. The basement is growing beneath every comfortable life, and eventually we all make the descent. The only question is whether we recognize where we are when we arrive, or whether we'll think we're still on the surface, still functional, still fine. While the underground claims us one thought at a time, one analysis at a time, one moment of paralyzing self-awareness at a time, until we look around and realize we've been in the basement all along. Welcome to the underground. The underground man has been waiting for you.